It was shaping up to be another long day on patrol in the backcountry. As a ranger in Yellowstone National Park, I was used to spending most of my shifts alone, surrounded by nothing but pine trees and the occasional glimpses of wildlife. Solitude never bothered me though. I welcomed the peace and quiet. It gave me time to appreciate the raw, untamed beauty of the wilderness. That morning, I had set out to hike along the gravel hiking path that wound through the dense forest. It was late autumn, and a damp chill clung to the air. Fog drifted between the trees, casting an eerie haze over the area. As I walked along the trail, I nodded in satisfaction at the lack of any footprints or signs of recent human activity. With winter fast approaching, the number of park visitors had dwindled. Soon, heavy snow would make these remote backcountry trails impassable until spring. A few miles into my patrol, a snapping twig jerked me alert. I froze, listening intently. In the distance, I could just make out heavy, lumbering footsteps trampling through the underbrush. Based on the pattern of movement, I guessed it was probably an elk. Relaxing slightly, I continued on. Wildlife sightings were common out here, but when the noises persisted, keeping pace with me down the trail, I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. No elk would follow a human that closely for so long unless it was injured or rabid. I fingered the bear spray on my belt, debating whether to stop and try to scare the animal off. The fog limited visibility though, and I didn't want to confront a potentially dangerous creature blindly. Better to keep moving for now. I picked up my pace. The thing matched my speed, stalking me from just out of view. Unease trickled down my spine. I've spent my life exploring these woods, but my instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. The elk theory no longer fit. This was unnatural. Up ahead, the trail ended abruptly at a sheer rock face. If I wanted to keep going, I'd have to leave the path and circle around through denser forest and rocky ravines. I really didn't want to do that with something on my tail. Glancing over my shoulder, I still couldn't spot whatever was following me in the mist. I debated calling this in on my radio, but didn't want to look like I was spooked over nothing. Shouldering my pack higher, I steeled my nerves and stepped off the trail. Almost immediately, I heard a raspy snarl from somewhere in the trees to my left. I whirled, bear spray in one hand and radio in the other, but saw only shadows. "Hello?" I called out. Making noise and following park staff is prohibited. "Show yourself." The answering silence unnerved me further. I squeezed my radio. "Base, this is Ranger Markson. I've got an unknown wildlife encounter near Junction Trail. Requesting backup to help clear the scene." Static filled my ears, no response. Mountains and fog sometimes disrupted the signals, but nerves still crawled through my gut. Moving slowly, I continued forward into the trees. Ahead, I spotted a rocky outcrop I could climb for a better vantage point. I scrambled up quickly. At the top, I finally caught sight of the thing as it weaved between trees about 100 yards away. Relief washed over me as I realized it was just a wolf, albeit a very large, aggressive-looking one. Wolves were uncommon here, but I could handle this. I was about to yell and wave my arms to scare it off when it stopped and stood up on two legs. Its back hunched grotesquely as it swiveled its head, sniffing the air. Upright, it was well over 7 feet tall. My mouth went dry and my knees nearly buckled in shock and fear. This was no ordinary animal. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the monstrous creature. There was an unnatural, preternatural wrongness to the way its body moved. Pack straps bit into my shoulders as I shuddered, unable to accept what I was seeing. The radio crackled faintly, but I barely registered it. The thing's ears pricked and it whipped its head around to stare straight at me, lips curling back to reveal a slavering maw full of jagged teeth. We locked eyes and a jolt of primal terror lanced through my body. I turned and fled, scrambling down the rocks. Behind me came an ear-splitting howl that shook the trees. Heavy paws thudded against the ground, gaining rapidly. I pushed my aching legs harder, lunging over fallen logs and rocks. I threw panicked glances over my shoulder but could barely make out the shape of the creature as it closed the distance. Suddenly, my boot caught on a root and I crashed to the forest floor. I threw my arms upright as monstrous jaws snapped inches from my face. Fetid breath washed over me as I fumbled desperately for my bear spray. Massive paws pinned my legs and I cried out in pain. Just before its fangs could rip out my throat, I managed to grab the spray and empty it straight into the creature's face. It reared back with an enraged, agonized roar, shaking its head violently. I scrambled back as it thrashed around, clawing at its eyes. Seizing the opportunity, I turned and ran harder than ever before, fueled by adrenaline and primal fear. I dashed heedlessly through the trees, branches whipping against my arms and face. My legs burned and my chest heaved, but I didn't dare slow down. At last I stumbled out of the trees and back onto the main hiking trail, nearly sobbing in relief. But my ordeal wasn't over yet. I still needed to get to safety. Rushing to the nearest trailhead, I jumped into my Park Service truck, threw it into gear and sped away down the rutted backcountry road. I drove until I reached park headquarters, only then daring to breathe freely. The other rangers on duty took one look at my wild eyes and scraped, bleeding face and immediately called for the authorities. I could barely form a coherent sentence, babbling wildly about the attack. Over the next few hours, I managed to recount the details of my encounter. The others listened gravely, believing me despite the fantastic nature of the tale. We assembled a heavily armed search team to comb the area but found no traces of the creature. I'll never view the remote wilderness here in the same light again. Something ancient and evil lurks within its depths. My wounds eventually healed, but the nightmares never fully disappeared. There are dark things in this world that defy explanation, horrors that should not exist outside of legend and folklore. But they do exist. And they are hungry. Thanks for watching. If you like scary stories, kindly subscribe for our channel.